Hi, welcome once again to Senior Focus. I'm your host, Bill Adams. Senior Focus is a show designed for folks over the age of about 50 or so, but if you're younger than that, you may have relatives or neighbors who could benefit from this information, and hopefully you'll stay tuned. We come to you thanks to Greg Roten of Armstrong's Channel 20 and 100, and also thanks to Keith Kaiser in the Mill Creek Metro Parks. Today we're in the beautiful library at the I almost said Fort Nature Center. We're actually at the Davis Center. The Davis Center is at Fellows Riverside Gardens, and again, this beautiful library, which is open to the public. Today we're going to be talking with Chief Jack Nichols. He is the Chief of Boardman Police. Welcome, Chief Nichols.
Thank you, Bill. Nice to be here.
Yeah, and we're going to talk to him about a new program that Boardman is starting up to kind of try to provide more services to the seniors in the community. And then also we're going to talk about some general information about safety and crime prevention, maybe for seniors. Why don't we just start off with how the idea came about and just the genesis of this new program.
Well, several years ago, the current Board of Trustees, we were involved in a police levy, getting the police levy passed. And during the campaign for that levy, the trustees took a good hard look at the operations at the police department, and they left me with some direction that there were certain groups of people that seemed to fall through the cracks and need to be serviced a little bit better by the police department and by the township as a whole. And one of those groups is the elderly. We've seen an ever-increasing amount of incidents where we'll be notified by a paper boy or a mailman that the mail is not being picked up or the papers are not being picked up from somebody's front porch or their mailbox. Okay. And our officers ultimately will be dispatched to the residence, and they'll make entry into the house. So they'll have to force their way in because when they knock on the door, there's no answer. And typically we find the person either deceased or often crumpled in a heap at the bottom of the cellar steps or laying in a bathtub, and they've been there for a number of days. And as the percentage of our elderly population increases, these calls for service for this type of incident, they also have been increasing over the years. So the direction from the Board of Trustees to the police department is to try to put a program into place to try to address this.
Right. And of course that makes it difficult because Boardman is one of the larger communities. I mean, you've got Youngstown and Boardman and Austintown, I think, in that order. But you have over 30,000 residents, I would think, right?
I think the census population at last count was 42,000.
42, okay.
Yes, yeah.
And so of that, again, the senior group is increasing. We've talked about that on Senior Focus about how, of our area, we have one of the larger percentages of 65 plus, not only in Ohio, but, outside of maybe Florida, in the country. So when you take 40,000 plus and just the sheer number of people who are over, say, 65, that's thousands of people.
True. And we have an awful lot of elderly people living alone in houses and in apartments. Also, we have a very large number of apartments in Boardman, and there's a substantial number of elderly people that live by themselves.
Right. And that made me think, I hadn't even thought of this. We talked over the phone about setting up the program here, but this is going back 25 years for me. I lived in Boardman at one point in an apartment. And there was a lady who was about 90, and she lived across the hall. And I'd really forgotten about this, but she had fallen one time and then called me, and I was able to, get over to help her out, and she was okay.
True.
But think of all the times where somebody's not able to, contact.
True, and it happens quite often.
So with that, the issue of people living alone and the falls and the people that maybe have medical issues, what is your plan now from, to start out? How are you going to start that?
Well, some of our neighboring jurisdictions, I believe Poland and Liberty, have begun basic elder watch programs within their own jurisdictions. And I know going back to Sheriff Wellington at the Mahoning County Sheriff's Department, he was quite concerned about the senior population throughout the county. And I believe that emphasis has been carried on through the administration of Jerry Green, who's the current Mahoning County Sheriff,
Right.
and they've done a pretty good job of it. My vision for what we want to do is to begin a program that would basically be computer-based,
Okay.
where people who would elect to be signed up to be in the program would be entered into a computer system, which would place daily phone calls to the resident.
Okay.
And from the systems that I've become aware of that are out there, they would either just have to press a button on their phone or one of the remote buttons that would be around their neck, or answer the phone,
Okay.
and everything would be fine. If the buttons aren't pushed or the phone isn't answered, then what would happen is the system would automatically make a phone call to a relative or neighbor
Okay.
and alert them to go check on the elderly person. And then if a contact could not be made with a relative or friend, then a call would be sent electronically to our dispatch center to send a police officer to check on the person.
Oh, that's good.
And it's important that it be done on a daily basis, and that would be the problem with trying to do it by having a person actually make phone calls personally. You know, employees get days off, they go on vacation, and
Right.
once we begin this program, we don't want there to be a gap in service. We want
Sure.
it to be something that occurs every day.
And again, just even the sheer volume, with the size of the township, I mean, conceivably, you could have several hundred or even more than 1,000 people sign up.
I would expect that once we would get it up and running, that will be the result, that we would
Right.
have a large number of people sign up for it.
And that's good because, you know, again, that gives some peace of mind to family members. You know, we have a lot of people who, the seniors are living here by themselves. Their family have grown up and they've moved out of town, and maybe their siblings have passed. So, you know, to have this kind of peace of mind, I think is real helpful.
Right, and hopefully we can avoid some of those very sad situations. I could remember some years back getting that call from a neighbor that the newspapers had piled up on her elderly neighbor's front porch, and we went and we broke in the back door of the house, and we found the elderly lady had fallen in her bathroom and fallen into her bathtub.
Yeah.
With her legs hanging out of the tub, and she laid in that bathtub for 3 days
Oh, my.
before we finally arrived. And fortunately, she was still alive, but that was just an awful situation for that poor woman to be in.
Right.
And had a program like this been in place, it wouldn't have been 3 days, it would have been a portion of 1 day.
Maybe a few hours,
Right,
yeah,
yes.
but that certainly relieves a lot of suffering. So this, you're looking at working on this during the summer and maybe starting it later in the year?
Right. My vision is, right now we have Sergeant Chuck Hillman, who is the school resource officer. And so when school ends, he has some time available. And so for this summer, his assignment will be to get the program up and running. And hopefully by fall, we'll be taking applications and entering people into the program. We'll have some software and some equipment to buy and some advertising to do, some public awareness stuff. But he'll be in charge of getting it done.
Now, besides this new senior watch program or check-in, are there resources like, I'm just thinking, for instance, if a senior is living at home and they're concerned about the safety of their home, or, you know, do you do some kind of a check, or can anybody go out there and give them some kind of advice on, you know, the locks and the windows and those kind of things?
Of course, you know, we respond to every call for service, but as far as a in-place program, we don't have that. The demand for service on our officers is quite strong. I mean,
Okay.
we find that day turn, afternoon turn, even night turn are quite busy for our officers. So
Right.
I don't have a structured program like that in place, but if somebody were to call and say, I'd like to have an officer come to my house and inspect it for any security concerns, we certainly would send a car out and have an officer talk to the person.
Okay. Well, with that in mind, I mean, I thought maybe, again, we would talk not only about the program, and we'll return to this maybe towards the end of the show, but also about just safety issues. You know, safety of the surroundings of where a senior might live at home or in an apartment, plus safety over the phone and through the mail, where I think a lot of crime, you know, might actually occur against seniors. So maybe going back to the home situation, what are some things that maybe seniors could look at, or their family members? Again, if family is watching, if you have a mom or dad or an aunt or uncle in the community, what could folks do to safeguard their house a little better?
Well, most of the victimization that we see of seniors comes in the form of fraud of some type. Of course, there's always house burglaries, but most people that burglarize houses try to select houses that nobody's in. They actually will ring the doorbell. But the fraud, there's just a multitude of scams and flim-flams out there that our seniors fall prey to. The one thing that comes to mind at this time of the year is the home repair fraud.
Right.
Where people will show up at your house offering to patch your roof or clean your gutters or paint your house. They convince the senior to pay for material
up
front,
Yeah.
and then they take the money and abscond with it. They never return to do the work, and that seems like this time of year. It's roofing, gutters, pavement, painting are the big four that we see in that type of situation.
Right.
People need to be very wary of anybody that shows up at their door unsolicited. And that means if you don't call them and say, come and give me a price, but they show up at your door and say, I want to give you a price, right away that should set off the alarm bells in their mind that this could potentially be a scam.
Right. I think of, again, my own situation. I was working with a gentleman, and this is over in western Pennsylvania, and I was at his house, and he was talking about his driveway was gravel. And I forget the amount, but it was like $8,000. It was some huge amount that he realized he'd gotten scammed. But I mean, he was kind of sheepish about talking about it.
Right. Well, typically what you'll see in the driveway paving scams is somebody will show up and knock on the door and say, hey, it's your lucky day. We have some extra pavement left on the truck from a big job we were doing down the street.
Right.
And we'll pave your driveway for $100 or $500 or $300 per unit.
Right.
And they make it sound like it's a real good price, and then they lay down a thin layer of pavement, and then when it comes time to pay, the unit number is what goes up. Well, we used 800 units at $200 per unit, so now you owe us $16,000, which is a price much higher than a legitimate paver would charge.
Right. So one way around that, if somebody does come to a home unsolicited, is that something where you would take a call? I mean, if somebody has questions about, can people call the police department and say, is this legitimate? Or
we would be more than happy to send a car out if somebody is, especially a senior, is suspicious or wondering if the person that's knocking on their door is a legitimate businessman. We would be more than happy to send a car out to just be present while the conversation's taking place.
Right.
And my bet would be that the person who knocked on the door is gone long before the police officer would arrive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's more than likely. Yeah. Well, you mentioned we've talked about like the paving, the roofing is another, I think, right? Another home repair.
Roofing is another one that kind of it goes along the same lines, that we have some extra shingles on the truck from a big job we did down the street, or we bought some shingles at a good price, and we'll pass the savings on to you, and we'll be happy to re-roof your house or repair your roof for a very low cost, but they typically say per bundle or per square or whatever, and then when the time comes to pay, there's usually some intimidation involved with a highly inflated price, and often the seniors will end up paying a lot more for that type of service.
So you always want to get something in writing ahead of time, and maybe have somebody in your family look it over. I mean, maybe one of the things would be, again, somebody just shows up, it's not a good idea.
Right.
The high pressure is never a good idea. Something says today only, you have to act now.
That's true. I mean, our area has some tremendously good contractors that do all of these types of service. They're local businesses. They've been here for a time, and they all know how to do business properly, and they use contracts. You can also check with the Better Business Bureau about people's history and where they've been, and about complaints they might have had filed against them. So the big key is if somebody shows up unsolicited at your door, the alarm bells should go off right away.
Well, another thing I just thought of too is when these folks show up, one of the things they may be trying to do is kind of case the house. I'm worried about people, letting someone in the door.
We have seen instances where somebody will knock at the front door and engage the homeowner in a lengthy conversation at the front porch, while an accomplice goes around and breaks into the house in the back, basically goes in and steals the lady's purse off the kitchen counter, or makes their way to the bedroom where they empty the jewelry box. So that type of thing, if it seems like this conversation is dragging on much longer than you would like it to, there's something not right.
Right, that's a good point. We'll talk about some phone scams and maybe some mail things too. But I was also just thinking about, because Boardman has a lot of shopping, you have grocery stores and the mall and all kind of businesses. Are there some tips maybe when people go to shop? Again, I'm thinking of a senior going to the grocery store, just how to be aware of your surroundings.
We see this periodically. In fact, we've seen an inflated number of it here recently, where women will leave their purse in the child carrier portion of the shopping cart.
Right.
And there's actually groups of people that specialize in doing this out there. They'll push their own shopping cart and they'll follow that woman through the store. And when she turns to the left or to the right to take a carton of milk or a loaf of bread off a shelf, they reach quickly into her purse and take her wallet out. So we caution against leaving purses in the child carrier. It's best to strap it over your shoulder and carry it. Or don't leave your wallet in your purse while it's in the child carrier. Stick it in a pocket. But we've seen an increase in that lately over the past 2 or 3 months, where the wallets have been taken right out of purses.
Well, I could see that happening too, when somebody just, when you leave your cart, just at one corner, one end of an aisle, and you just walk a few feet. It doesn't take very long for somebody to just take it.
And as a variation of that, we see in the parking lots when people push the shopping cart out to their car and they begin loading the groceries in the car, leaving the purse in the child carrier.
Right.
Eventually, they turn around and their purse is gone out of the shopping cart. Some passerby just hooks it right on their arm and walks off with it while the back is turned. So always remove your purse first and put it in the car before you proceed to unload the grocery cart.
Yeah, that's good advice, and unfortunately, it's needed. There are people out there that have nothing better to do than to think of ways to steal money. And speaking of that, some of the scams on the phone, say those are very elaborate, and again, this doesn't just affect seniors. I mean, there could be people, in their 30s or 40s that could fall for some of these things.
And every single day, we get reports of it, and we know that there's many more instances of it that happen than get reported to us because people are embarrassed once they realize that they've been scammed. But we've heard recently of elderly people getting phone calls from somebody claiming to be an FBI agent or an IRS agent and threatening to come to arrest them if they don't pay additional tax money. I think the most recent one I heard was they claimed that when the taxes were filed, there was a mistake made on the tax return, and you actually owe an additional amount of money, $300 or $1,200, and an agent will be there today to arrest you if you don't pay this amount of money, and we want you to go to the Walmart, to the Western Union counter, and send Western Union money wire transfer to this address. Well, the FBI and the IRS will never call you up on the phone and demand money, no matter how convincing they sound. And they will never have you send money wire transfer through Western Union. That's just not the way those agencies work, and it's a scam 100% of the time.
Right, and that's that's a giveaway when they're talking about wire transfer or something like that. What about, is that similar to the prepaid cards that I've heard about?
Yeah, that also occurs is with the prepaid gift cards. That somebody will call you up on the phone with a song and dance about being an inspector for Visa or for MasterCard and ask you to put a certain amount of money on a card and send it in, and you'll be reimbursed with the money credited back to your account. And that's just a scam. Another one is they'll actually send you a check in the mail. You'll get a check in the mail. And the instructions that you'll receive either with the check or in a separate phone call will be that they want you to cash that check. The check might be for $5,000. Cash that check, take $2,500 of the money, go to the Western Union and send that $2,500 to a different address, and the other $2,500 you may keep. So you cash the check, you send off the money, and then the bank notifies you 3 days later that the check was no good.
Oh, so you never had the money.
So you never had the money.
But they have your
Right,
money.
they have your money. So, and again, it's all a matter of if somebody solicits you, if you're not making the call to the bank or to the IRS or to the credit card company, if somebody calls you and says, I'm the bank or I'm the credit card company, be very, very wary of it, because it most likely is not.
Yeah. You know, and a lot of this, unfortunately, is based on people's, trying to play on people's, not greed, but I guess,
Right.
you can make 25% on your money, you got to do this, as opposed to, well, especially now these days. I mean, I could see someone, if you're a senior and you're relying on your investments, and the banks aren't paying anything now. I mean,
Right.
literally, you may get a money market for 1% or something like that, or 0.5%. So yeah, if you see something saying guaranteed 10%, that's probably wrong.
Yeah, and if somebody calls you up and tells you won the Publishers Clearinghouse, and
Right.
and you won 350,000 or 860,000, whatever the amount is, and they want you to send them money before they send you your money, because you have to pay the check or
Oh, the
pay the
taxes,
taxes or
yeah.
the processing fee. Again, it's a scam. Don't fall for it. And every day we have people tell us that they fell for it.
Yeah. But there must be some good stories too, I would think. Have you heard from I'm thinking of maybe the bank teller who catches somebody, where, again, I've heard of these kind of things where the senior goes to the bank because they've been asked to withdraw, a lot of money, and the bank teller says, wait a minute here, alarm
Bank
bell.
tellers do catch it a lot. I can think of several situations that I personally have been involved in where the bank manager would call me in my office, and we would send an officer to check it out, and sure enough, that their customers in the process of being scammed. They're trying to withdraw a large amount of money from the bank, 5,000, 10,000, or even more.
Oh, good.
And so we've had some successes there, but it's like you said, it comes down to the alertness of a bank teller.
So in order to catch more of this, that's why we're talking here on Senior Focus, is to try to educate not only seniors who are out there, but again, if you're a family member, a neighbor, a lot of people don't want to talk about their finances, but it's, this is something you could bring up just in conversation is, I heard this on TV the other day, or I read this, we got to be careful if I got something in the mail or somebody came to the house or.
Sure. I mean, we would much rather get involved and help somebody prevent losing their life savings or their retirement or a large portion of it than have to try to figure out who ripped them off and investigate it afterwards. Because
Right.
often it's just impossible. You don't know who the person was that made the phone call, and there's nowhere to go with the investigation.
Yeah, I guess you would work at that point maybe with the Attorney General's office or, even FBI, but a lot of these companies move so fast.
A lot of them aren't actually even companies, and when the victim wire transfers the money to someplace like Trinidad
Yeah.
or Jamaica, there's really nothing we can do with that.
Yeah, it's
at that
over
point.
then,
So,
yeah. Well, again, we're talking with Chief Jack Nichols. He's with the Boardman Police Department. Chief Nichols, did you want to give out just a general number for the police department if people had questions?
Our non-emergency number is area code 330-726-4144, and from there our dispatcher can transfer your call to whoever would handle your question most adequately.
And we have a few minutes to go, and maybe we'll go back then to the new Senior Watch program that you're setting up. Again, if people are interested, when will you be taking calls for that? Do you know yet? Or?
I would expect that by the end of August, we should have at least the hardware and software in place and have policy written and like that. And as
Okay.
I've read about these programs in other jurisdictions, there is a period of time where we would advertise. We would actually come to like Armstrong Cable and ask them to put essentially commercials or notifications on the air, and go to the Vindicator and ask for articles and advertisement to be put there. So
Sure.
I'm hoping that by fall that we have progress made, at least where it's beginning to go into operation. It's a little more complicated than you might think. So it'll take a little bit of effort through the summer, but we're going to be working on it, and hopefully by fall we have it up and running.
In the meantime, again, if people are concerned about, a neighbor, should they make a call?
Absolutely. I mean, that, paying attention to the newspapers and the mail piling up, at the front door. A lot of times people know the habits of their neighbors, the comings and goings, and we'll get a call where I haven't seen Mrs. Jones in 3 days, She hasn't been out in 3 days, and they know that every morning she walks her dog. Well, we'll send a car and investigate that set of circumstances. And I have to tell you, Bill, quite often, we find either the person has died in the house or is close to death because of a fall or an illness. So it's not an uncommon thing that happens anymore.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if, because I used to work with the Agency on Aging, which is out of Niles, but it serves 4 counties. And I wonder if there's, and maybe there is something, maybe there should be, I don't know, if there's a coordination between like their staff and local police departments. I know you mentioned the sheriff's office, and they do a good job. They have a senior officer, and
They do.
but like the Agency on Aging, for instance, and again, this is just directed, I guess, also to the audience. If you have an elder who's living alone, there are many programs out there that are available for someone, to get home health services or Meals on Wheels. So I'm just thinking of trying to alleviate, what you're finding, where people are by themselves and no one's really checking on them.
Right.
So, short of what you're trying to do, to set up for the fall, maybe.
Right.
At this point, there are other resources.
Right. Well, like I said, early on, when I became chief of police, the Board of Trustees and Boardman told me very clearly to be aware of the people in our community who tend to fall through the cracks. And certainly the elderly are one of those groups of people, and that's kind of been one of my orders from my bosses. So I need to pay attention to that and do a good job with it.
Yeah. Well, again, that's something, though, for you out there, if you know of a relative. It doesn't have to be in Boardman. It could be in any of in Mahoning County or the 4 counties that the Agency on Aging serves. You can contact them, and they can do an assessment. They go out and visit the senior. Another resource I was just thinking of is Adult Protective Services, which is through the county. Mahoning County has Adult Protective Services. They're through the Job and Family Services office, I think, over on Oak Hill. And they're trained and they're designed to go out and check on people who either there's allegations of abuse or neglect by, family or other people, but also self-neglect.
Right.
There are seniors who, we all want to live at home. We all want to be left alone, right? Generally. We want to live where we want to live. But there comes a time where you could, be not feeding yourself, or, things could be dangerous in the home. So.
Right, and that does happen.
Yeah.
That situation occurs frequently.
Yeah. Well, again, we've been talking with Chief Jack Nichols. Chief, is there anything that we haven't covered as far as, again, just general safety and of seniors?
Yeah, the general overview that we did here, covers the stuff I think for this time of year. Especially the home repair scams now I know will be starting up, and we'll see that throughout the summer. So if you had a great point, if somebody has a question about a contractor that showed up at their house, especially unsolicited, we don't mind sending a car out to check it out. And that's a definitive way to check out the person and make sure the legitimacy of what they're trying to sell you is actually there.
And if you do that, you may save some other people a lot of grief, too.
You undoubtedly will.
Better safe than sorry.
Sure, yes.
Well, thanks a lot, Chief. Appreciate it. Again, we've been talking with Chief Jack Nichols from Boardman Police. You've been watching Senior Focus. I'm your host, Bill Adams. And we want to thank, again, Greg Roten from Channel 20 and 100 with Armstrong. Also, thanks to Keith Kaiser. He is generous enough to let us use the Davis Visitor Center. And in this case, we're in the beautiful library at Fellows Riverside Gardens. So until next time, thank you for watching.